Welcome to the Next Thought podcast, where we unpack curated insights from the world's most impactful thinkers, books, and mental models all in under 20 minutes. Today, we're embarking on a deep dive into a book that promises, well, a really refreshing, maybe brutally honest, and deeply practical guide to living a more meaningful life. It's Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Feck.
Right. And this deep dive, it isn't really about promoting indifference,
Yeah.
or
Mm.
pushing some kind of fake positivity all the time.
Oh, exactly.
Instead, our mission really is to distill the core wisdom from this book for you. We're focusing on how you can truly learn to direct your time, your energy, towards what genuinely matters. And that means, well, redefining what it means to actually not give a fuck.
Okay, let's start maybe by unpacking one of the book's most fascinating stories. It kind of introduces its counterintuitive premise. It's about Charles Bukowski,
Bukowski. Yeah.
who was, well, by many accounts, an alcoholic, a womanizer, a chronic gambler, and often, on his worst days, a poet.
Right. He spent decades just writing, facing rejection after rejection. It often led him down a path of pretty severe alcohol-fueled depression.
Yeah, sounds rough, but then at 50, something shifted. An editor finally took a chance on him.
Against the odds, yeah.
And Bukowski, amazingly, wrote his first novel, Post Office, in just 3 weeks.
3 weeks. Wow.
And it went on to sell millions. So you'd expect, like, a big triumphant epitaph on his tombstone, right?
Yeah.
Something about perseverance or genius.
Yeah, you'd think so.
But instead, it simply reads, "Don't try."
Which is just, what's truly insightful there is how his breakthrough, it didn't come from this relentless pursuit of being a winner or, chasing external validation. It actually emerged from him accepting his identity as, well, as he saw it, a loser, and just writing honestly from that place. And that really challenges our modern culture's like obsessive focus on these relentlessly positive expectations.
Totally. That constant demand to be happier, be healthier, be the best.
Mm.
And the book really drives home this point that conventional self-help, by constantly telling you to be more of something, it inadvertently makes you fixate on what you lack.
Right. If you're always being told, pursue more confidence or find more happiness, it subtly reinforces this idea that you aren't enough right now.
Yeah, it feeds into that feeling of inadequacy, like the old saying, right? The smallest dog barks the loudest.
Precisely. And this brings up a crucial question. What happens when we get obsessed with needing to feel good all the time?
Yeah, what does happen?
The book introduces what it cleverly calls the feedback loop from hell,
Oh, yeah, I remember this.
where you get anxious about being anxious, or you get angry about being angry. You get stuck in this loop. And our modern society, especially with social media, just constantly bombarding us with these curated, perfect lives.
Oh, yeah.
It makes us feel like something is deeply wrong with us if we experience any negative emotions.
Yeah.
And that just keeps the loop going.
So how do we break free? What's the solution, according to the book?
Well, the book suggests the way out is to short-circuit that loop
Okay.
by simply not giving a fuck about feeling bad.
Right. Just accept it.
Yeah, it's about accepting, okay, I feel like crap right now. Acknowledging it, and then almost defiantly saying, who gives a fuck?
Okay. I get that.
And this leads us straight into a core concept, the backwards law.
The backwards law, okay?
What's fascinating about this is the paradox it reveals. The very desire for a positive experience is in itself a negative experience.
Huh. Okay, unpack that a bit.
Well, think about it. The more desperately you want to be rich,
Right.
the poorer you might actually feel,
Yeah.
regardless of what's in your bank account. It's that gap between desire and reality.
And conversely.
Conversely, the acceptance of a negative experience can, paradoxically, become a positive one.
Okay. And this concept, it takes another turn too, right? The not giving a fuck part.
Exactly. It operates in reverse.
Yeah.
Actively embracing or even pursuing pain often generates incredibly positive outcomes.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, think about the physical pain in the gym. It hurts, but it leads to better health, right?
Sure.
Or setbacks in business. They're painful, but they lead to deeper understanding, more resilience, maybe a better approach next time.
Right. Learning from mistakes.
Yeah. The book argues that avoiding suffering is actually a form of suffering itself. Pain, it clarifies, is just this inextricable, necessary thread woven into the fabric of life. You can't avoid it entirely.
Okay, so not giving a fuck isn't about being totally numb or indifferent.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely not.
Yeah.
The book really emphasizes that it's a subtle art. It's crucial to understand this isn't about true indifference.
Which the book says is often just a mask for fear.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Manson argues that truly indifferent people often try to appear that way precisely because they actually care too much about what other people think. They're afraid.
Interesting. So what's the first subtlety then?
The first subtlety is that it means being comfortable with being different, not simply being apathetic or indifferent. As humans, we're fundamentally wired to care about something. We can't just switch that off. The real profound question here is, what are we choosing to give our finite fucks about?
Choosing our battles, basically.
Kind of, yeah. And broadening that, the second subtlety is that to genuinely not give a fuck about adversity, you first have to be deeply invested in something more important than that adversity.
Okay, like having bigger fish to fry.
Exactly. The book shares this illustrative anecdote about an elderly lady just screaming at a cashier over a 30-cent coupon.
Oh, I remember that one. Yikes.
Right. Her problem wasn't really the 30 cents. It was that she simply had nothing more, well, fuck-worthy in her life to dedicate her energy and emotion to. That was the biggest thing happening for her.
Wow. So if you find yourself constantly getting worked up about trivial stuff,
Yeah.
the book suggests it might be a sign that you don't have enough truly meaningful, fuck-worthy things going on in your life.
That's the implication, yeah. It's a potential indicator. And the third subtlety is this. Whether you consciously realize it or not, you are always choosing what to give a fuck about.
Oh, how so?
Well, think about when we're young. Everything feels new, important, dramatic, right? So we tend to care about everything.
True. Everything's a big deal.
But as we mature, we naturally become more selective, hopefully.
Hmm.
By middle age, our identity often solidifies a bit, and we find ourselves reserving our ever-dwindling fucks, as the book puts it, for what truly matters. Things like family, close friends, maybe a deeply held purpose or value.
And this simplification, this focus, can actually lead to being happier.
The book argues, yes, it can lead to a more consistently happier and more focused life. Less noise.
Okay, this leads us to another, maybe provocative idea, that happiness itself can be a problem.
Right. Which sounds weird at first.
Yeah. The book uses the story of the Buddha to illustrate this. He was a prince, raised in this palace, deliberately shielded from all suffering.
Total bubble.
Yeah. Yet, despite this perfect environment, he became a pissed-off young man, finding every experience empty, meaningless. It was only after he snuck out and actually saw human suffering, sickness, old age, death, that he had this existential crisis, and it led him to give up everything.
Which raises a really profound question for all of us. If you're always insulated from struggle, from suffering, how do you genuinely experience meaning?
Yeah, how do you?
The book contends that happiness isn't some solvable equation, something you just achieve and then you're done.
Yeah.
Dissatisfaction, unease, they're inherent and actually necessary parts of being human.
Necessary? Why necessary?
Well, our suffering is, in a way, biologically useful. It's nature's preferred agent for inspiring change, for driving us forward. We're kind of wired to be mildly dissatisfied to fuel innovation and ensure our survival.
Huh. Never thought of it that way. So problems don't actually stop.
According to the book, no. They just evolve. They get better, hopefully.
Like the Warren Buffett example, he still has money problems.
Right. But they're arguably better money problems than those faced by someone, say, experiencing homelessness. Life, the book says, is just this endless series of problems.
So the goal isn't a problem-free life.
No, that's impossible. The goal is a life full of good problems, problems you choose to engage with.
Okay, so happiness comes from solving problems.
Exactly. It's an action. It results from the solving. You won't magically stumble upon it reading an article or following some guru. The secret sauce really is in the solving.
Makes sense. And the book points out two common ways people kind of mess this up, right? Denial and victim mentality.
Yeah, those are the big pitfalls. Denial is just ignoring the problems exist.
Sticking your head in the sand.
Right. And victim mentality is believing you can't solve them, that it's all someone else's fault or beyond your control.
Both feel good short-term, maybe.
Maybe. They provide a temporary escape or high. But inevitably, the book argues, they lead to long-term misery because the problems don't actually go away.
And what about emotions in all this?
Emotions. The book says they're often overrated.
Really? How so?
They're basically biological signals, feedback mechanisms.
Yeah.
They're not absolute commandments you have to obey.
So negative emotions are like warning lights.
Yeah, a call to action. Something needs attention. And positive emotions are like rewards. Good job. Keep doing that.
So we shouldn't always trust our feelings implicitly.
Right. And denying the negative ones, just trying to push them away, Well, that prevents us from actually engaging with and solving the underlying problems they're signaling.
This sounds a bit like the hedonic treadmill idea.
Exactly, that feeling of constantly striving, changing our situation, but somehow ending up feeling pretty much the same emotionally.
Our problems are recursive, unavoidable.
Yep. Which brings us to this really powerful, maybe uncomfortable question the book poses.
Okay, what is it?
What pain do you want in your life?
Want pain? That sounds masochistic.
Well, not exactly. It's about choosing your struggles. The book argues that what you're willing to struggle for is a far greater determinant of how your life turns out than what you simply want to enjoy.
Because genuine happiness requires struggle.
That's the core assertion. You have to earn it, in a sense, through tackling meaningful problems.
That really resonates with me. I remember fantasizing about being a rock star.
Okay. Yeah.
I loved the result, right? The
Yeah.
image of me on stage, the crowd cheering. But I eventually realized I wasn't actually in love with the process.
Ah, the day-to-day grind.
Exactly. The daily drudgery of practice, the logistics, finding a band, the constant pain and rejection of trying to find gigs. The truth was, I didn't actually like the climb.
And the book nails that, right? It says, who you are is defined by what you're willing to struggle for. If you weren't willing to struggle for the rock star life.
Then maybe I didn't really want it. Not really.
Yeah. Okay, let's shift gears. Let's talk about this character, Jimmy.
Jimmy. All
Yeah.
talk, no walk.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Constantly pitching these grand business ideas, but nothing ever actually happened.
Right. But he always felt great about himself.
Yeah, exhibited what the book calls a delusional level of self-confidence.
Okay, so what's the point there?
Well, it raises a critical point about the whole self-esteem movement from the 60s and 70s. The one focused on making people feel good about themselves, sometimes regardless of effort or reality.
Yeah, participation trophies and all that.
Kind of. The data, the book argues, is in. Merely feeling good about yourself without, a good reason for it.
Yeah.
It just leads to a population full of Jimmies, people who feel entitled but aren't very effective.
So true self-worth isn't just feeling positive.
No. It's more about how you feel about your negative aspects, your flaws, your mistakes, and, crucially, what you're doing about them.
So Jimmy represents entitlement, feeling you deserve good stuff without earning it.
Exactly. His fixation on feeling good led straight to self-delusion.
I can kind of relate to that from my adolescence, actually. Maybe not business ideas, but definitely a sense of entitlement in, relationships.
The book argues that the deeper our pain or insecurity, the more helpless we feel.
Yeah.
And the more entitlement we adopt is this, compensatory mechanism, a defense.
Wow.
And expanding on this, the book makes another profound point. There's really no such thing as a truly personal problem.
What do you mean my problems feel pretty personal?
Well, yeah, they feel personal, but if you're facing an issue, anxiety, relationship trouble, whatever millions of others have had it, or will have it.
Okay, so I'm not alone.
Exactly. And realizing that your problems aren't uniquely severe or isolating, that's often the first, most crucial step toward actually solving them. It takes away some of that paralyzing why me feeling.
That feels incredibly relevant today, especially with what the book calls victimhood chic.
Oh yeah, that social media trend where people seem to perpetually frame themselves as victims, even over tiny things.
Right, it seems almost addictive.
It can be. It provides this kind of high of moral righteousness,
Yeah.
but the downside is huge. It sucks attention away from people who are actual victims of serious stuff,
Yeah.
and it distracts everyone from addressing real systemic issues.
And this ties back to the media showing us only exceptional lives.
Right. This pervasive, mass media-driven exceptionalism. It constantly showcases extraordinary lives, extraordinary achievements.
Makes the rest of us feel inadequate.
Exactly. Which drives people to compensate through things like entitlement, like Jimmy, or maybe addiction, or just feeling generally crappy about their average lives.
But the people who do become exceptional.
Yeah, the book argues they aren't usually driven by this inherent belief that they're already great.
No.
No, they're often obsessed with relentless improvement. And that obsession often stems from an unwavering belief that they are, in fact, not that great at all right now. They see the gap.
Huh. So they embrace a not being great yet.
Yeah. Which leads to the idea that accepting mediocrity.
Oof, that sounds rough.
It does. The book compares it to eating your veggies. It might not taste good at first, but it's absolutely essential for long-term emotional health.
Oh, so.
It lifts that constant crushing pressure to be amazing at everything. And instead, it fosters a deeper appreciation for life's basic, ordinary pleasures.
Yeah.
The everyday stuff.
Okay. Less pressure, more appreciation. I can see that.
And this brings up another critical point. Our need for certainty.
Ah, certainty. We all crave that, right?
We do. But the book provides tons of examples, historical and personal, of how humans have just been flat out wrong about everything throughout history. Our understanding constantly evolves.
So growth is about being less wrong.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
It's an endlessly iterative process of moving from wrong to slightly less wrong. Certainty, therefore, is framed as the ultimate enemy of growth. If you think you know everything, you stop learning.
So we should seek doubt instead.
Actively seek doubt, yeah. Constantly question our deeply held beliefs, our feelings. The book warns about the dangers of pure certainty, using an example of someone totally convinced they can cure death.
Right. Embodying self-help maxims, but with totally skewed values.
Exactly. And that unwavering certainty, the book warns, can even breed evil, because it closes you off to other perspectives, to empathy, to correction.
There's a paradox there too, isn't there?
Absolutely. The more you try to be certain about everything, the more insecure and rigid you actually feel. You're constantly defending.
Whereas if you embrace uncertainty,
If you're open to being wrong, the more comfortable and adaptable you become. You're not threatened by new information.
this connects to Manson's law of avoidance.
Yes. Which states, the more something threatens your perceived identity, the more you will instinctively avoid it,
Even if it's good for you.
even if it's potentially profoundly good for you. This explains why people are often just as afraid of success as they are of failure. Success might mean changing who they think they are.
Wow. Okay. So what's the advice then?
The book encourages us to, metaphorically speaking, kill yourself.
Whoa. Okay. Explain that one carefully.
Right. Philosophically, it means letting go of these arbitrary mental constructions of who you think you are or who you should be,
Yeah.
letting go of that fixed identity.
And that's liberating.
Hugely liberating, because it allows you to act, to fail, and to truly grow without feeling like your core self is under attack with every setback, instead of endlessly trying to find yourself.
Which is impossible anyway.
Maybe. The book suggests redefining your metrics in more like mundane, broad ways. You're a student, a partner, a friend, a creator. Actions and roles, not fixed personality traits.
And there are questions we can ask ourselves to cultivate this healthy doubt.
Yeah, simple but powerful ones.
Okay.
What if I'm wrong? What would it mean if I were wrong? And crucially, would being wrong create a better or worse problem than my current problem?
Okay, those are good. They help uncover flawed values.
Right,
Okay.
exactly. And help us embrace growth instead of clinging to certainty. So this leads naturally to values. What are good ones versus bad ones?
According to Manson, anyway.
Right, according to the book,
Yeah.
it identifies what it calls shitty values, things that invariably lead to poor problems and dissatisfaction.
Like what?
Things like pleasure just for pleasure's sake, material success as the ultimate end goal, always needing to be right, and insisting on staying positive no matter what.
Why are those bad? They sound kind of good.
They're generally superficial, the book argues. They're often externally driven, relying on outside validation or circumstances, and they often lead to more anxiety and a sense of emptiness because they're never quite enough.
Okay, so what are the good values then?
Good values are described as reality-based, socially constructive, and immediate or controllable. Things you can enact right now.
Examples?
Honesty, vulnerability, self-respect, respecting yourself through your actions, curiosity, humility, creativity.
Would you do internally?
Primarily, yes.
Yeah.
They represent ongoing processes, ways of being, rather than finite goals you can just check off and be done with.
Like the Picasso example.
Exactly. He stayed incredibly prolific into his 90s. His underlying value wasn't a finite goal like become famous. It was the endless process of honest expression. That's a value that keeps giving back, keeps driving you.
Okay, and this ties into failure.
Big time. This is a really liberating insight. Failure is, in fact, the only way forward.
The only way.
The book makes a compelling case that true improvement in anything, a skill, a relationship, whatever, is built upon thousands of tiny failures.
So if someone's better than me at something,
It's likely because they have simply failed at it far more times than you have. They've put in the reps, fallen down more, learned more.
but we're taught to avoid failure, right? School, work.
Exactly. Our education systems, the media, they often punish failure or only highlight success, which stifles us. It makes us afraid to try things we might not be good at immediately.
But the truth is, you can only really succeed at something.
If you are willing to utterly fail at it, you have to be okay with sucking it first.
The book mentions studies on trauma, too, like WWII survivors.
Yeah, it references the work of Kazimierz Dabrowski, a Polish psychiatrist. He studied how profound trauma, these incredibly painful experiences, can actually be a catalyst for intense psychological growth and resilience. Positive disintegration, he called it.
So our biggest changes come after our worst moments.
Often, yes. Our most radical transformations frequently happen right at the tail end of our worst, most challenging periods, when we're forced to rebuild.
This brings us to the do something principle.
Ah, yes, very practical. The idea is simple. Action isn't just the effect of motivation, it's also the cause of motivation.
Okay, so don't wait to feel motivated.
Don't wait. If you find yourself stuck, paralyzed by indecision or fear, the advice is just start working on it. Even the smallest, most insignificant task related to the bigger goal.
And the action itself creates momentum.
Exactly. The very act of doing will, surprisingly, inspire motivation, which then fuels more action. It's an upward spiral. And when action becomes the metric, failure just becomes data, progress, information.
Okay, I like that. Action is the key.
And this process, this doing something, is crucial for adopting new values too. It's not just thinking about them.
Like the author's own story about nomadism.
Right. He shares his experience traveling the world, initially driven by this thirst for adventure, but also, he admits, by some deeply ingrained commitment issues.
Running away, maybe.
A little bit, yeah. After years of chasing breath, seeing everything, doing everything, he had this realization: absolute freedom, endless options, meant nothing without meaning, without depth.
So what was the lesson?
The profound lesson was that meaning and importance don't come from having endless options. They come through a rejection of alternatives, through narrowing your focus, through commitment.
Commitment. That sounds restrictive, though.
It can feel that way initially, but the book uses this anecdote about the blunt honesty in Russian culture.
Oh, yeah, where people are just brutally direct.
Yeah, and how accepting that directness, accepting rejection, can actually lead to this strange, profound sense of liberation. You know where you stand. There's trust built on that honesty.
So saying no is important.
Vital. The book argues that if we don't reject anything, if we try to say yes to everything and everyone, we ultimately stand for nothing. We become wishy-washy.
And avoiding rejection feels good short term.
Sure, it avoids discomfort, but in the long run, it makes us rudderless. We don't define ourselves.
This connects to boundaries in relationships, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Healthy relationships, the book says, have clear boundaries. Individuals take responsibility for their own problems, their own emotions, rather than blaming their partner or trying to fix their partner's issues.
And unhealthy relationships.
Often characterized by poor boundaries, poor sense of responsibility. There's blaming, maybe codependency, and a profound inability to either give or receive rejection healthily. Like saying no or hearing no feels catastrophic.
But the book argues commitment gives you freedom. That sounds like another paradox.
It is. But think about the paradox of choice research. Yeah. Having too many options often leads to less satisfaction, more anxiety.
Analysis paralysis.
Right. Deep investment in one person, one place, one craft, one cause. It actually opens up a wealth of opportunities, experiences, and depths of understanding that are simply not available through just skimming the surface of endless, shallow experiences. Depth over breadth.
Okay. That makes sense. Commitment creates depth, which is freeing in its own way.
Exactly. Which brings us to the final, maybe the ultimate value the book discusses.
Yes.
Mortality. Death.
Right. Heavy stuff. He shares that story about his friend Josh.
Yeah, a deeply personal, tragic story. His friend drowned at 19. And that event became the clearest before/after point in the author's own life.
How did it change him?
Well, this profoundly painful experience led him to this startling, almost terrifying realization. If there's ultimately no inherent cosmic reason to do anything, then there's also no inherent reason not to do anything.
Okay. What does that mean practically?
It means that in the face of inevitable death, all the trivial fears, fear of embarrassment, fear of shame, fear of social rejection, they just lose their power. They seem insignificant compared to the ultimate end.
So it was liberating.
For him, yes. His life transformed. He stopped avoiding things just because they were painful or uncomfortable. He started truly living, arguably, because the ultimate fear, death, was already acknowledged.
This connects to that Ernest Becker book, The Denial of Death.
Right. Pulitzer winner. Becker argued that humans are unique because we can conceptualize our own death. And this creates a deep underlying death terror.
And we try to cope with that.
Yeah. We create what Becker called immortality projects. Our values, our achievements, our legacies, things we build to try and make our conceptual selves, our identities, live on forever. Names on buildings, books, children, impact.
Trying to leave a mark.
Exactly. But Becker, apparently on his own deathbed, came to this bitter antidote.
Which was?
That these immortality projects, our desperate attempts to deny death, are actually the problem, not the solution. We should question this conceptual self we're trying to make immortal and become far more comfortable with the stark, liberating reality of our own finite existence.
Wow. Okay, so there's a sunny side of death.
That's how the book puts it. Acknowledging death obliterates trivial values. It forces us to confront a far more painful, but also far more important question. What is your true legacy? What really matters in the time you have?
So death acts like a compass.
Yes. Without acknowledging death's ever-present gaze, the superficial stuff seems important, and the truly important stuff seems superficial or too hard. Death helps us orient all our other values and decisions.
So happiness, then, isn't really about personal gain or feeling good.
Not primarily. It comes from caring about something far greater than yourself, from being a contributing part of something larger, having values beyond your own comfort.
And entitlement does the opposite.
Exactly. Entitlement isolates us. It shrinks our world down to just our own narrow biases, projections, and desires.
So looking at modern society,
Yeah, the book argues that despite being, materially well off in many parts of the world,
we're kind of psychologically tormented.
often, yeah,
Ugh.
by relatively low-level, shallow issues. We relinquish responsibility, we cling to these arbitrary certainties, we fall into inaction because we're terrified of failure or rejection.
And we confuse attention with success.
Big time. The book challenges that cultural confusion. Getting lots of attention doesn't mean you've achieved something meaningful or that you're actually successful in terms of your own values.
So the final message is, we're already great. How does that work?
It suggests you are already great, not because of some external achievement or because you're special,
Okay.
but because, in the face of all this endless confusion, unavoidable suffering, and the certainty of death, you still continue to choose. You choose what to give a fuck about and what not to. That act of choosing, of valuing, is itself significant.
Right, like that Bukowski quote at the end.
Yeah, it's powerful. We're all going to die, all of us. What a circus. That alone should make us love each other, but it doesn't. We are terrorized and flattened by life's trivialities. We are eaten up by nothing.
Wow.
And the author's final reflection on his friend Josh's death really hits home. Peering into that darkness, the darkness of our own mortality, doesn't have to make life darker. It can actually make it brighter, lighter. It helps us overcome resistance to, well, pretty much anything else.
Because what's left to be afraid of, really?
Kind of, yeah. It puts everything in perspective.
Well, we hope this deep dive into the subtle art of not giving a feck has given you some powerful insights, maybe into choosing your values, embracing struggle, finding meaning in a world that constantly seems to demand more and more.
Yeah, and remember, the key takeaway isn't about not caring at all. It's really about discerning what truly matters to you and then aligning your precious, limited fucks with those things.
Don't forget to subscribe to the Next Thought podcast.